The marble floor of BV Bank caught the noon light, sharp and cold. Sarah Mora stepped through the revolving doors. 62, silver hair neat, brown skin weathered but steady. She wore a plain cardigan, carried a cloth tote. No one saw Power. They saw a woman who didn't belong. The lobby murmured, heels clicking, printers humming, the soft pulse of money moving through machines. At the counter, the young teller looked up. His smile thinned. Ma'am, the welfare office is down the street. Sarah paused. The words landed heavy, but not new. She'd heard their shape before, in boardrooms, in silence, in years of proving. Her breath steadied. Then she placed a folded slip before him.
40,000.
40,000. A laugh, a smirk. The air thickened. She adjusted the strap on her tote. You might want to remember my name, she said. His fingers hesitated, just a second too long. The woman ahead of Sarah finished her transaction with a smile and a "Have a great day" from the teller. Sarah stepped forward. The teller, young, white, mid-20s, nameplate reading Jessica, glanced up. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. She took in Sarah's appearance in one sweeping look. The worn cardigan, the cloth bag, the absence of jewelry or designer accessories. Something shifted in her expression, subtle but unmistakable. Can I help you? Jessica's tone was flat, professional in the way that suggested tolerance rather than service. Yes, thank you. Sarah's voice was warm, steady. I'd like to withdraw $15,000 from my business account, please. She placed her debit card on the counter, aligned it carefully with the edge. Jessica picked up the card like it might be contaminated. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she scanned it. 15,000? The inflection made it a question, not a confirmation. That's correct. The teller's fingers hesitated over her keyboard. She glanced toward the back office, then back at Sarah. Can I see your ID, please? Sarah produced her driver's license without comment. Jessica examined it longer than necessary, comparing the photo to Sarah's face multiple times. Around them, other customers moved through their transactions smoothly. At the next window, a middle-aged white man withdrew a large sum with nothing more than a signature and a handshake. And, do you have any other documentation? Jessica's voice carried an edge now. For the account? What kind of documentation? Proof that this is your account. Business registration, tax documents, something that shows the source of these funds. Sarah kept her expression neutral, but her fingers tightened slightly on the counter's edge. I've never been asked for that before. It's standard procedure for large withdrawals. Jessica's tone suggested she was doing Sarah a favor by explaining, especially for certain situations. The pause before situations hung in the air like smoke. Behind Sarah, the line was growing. She could feel eyes on her back, hear the shuffle of impatient feet. At the far end of the teller row, a supervisor, white, male, early 40s, walked past, glanced at Jessica, then at Sarah. He slowed his steps. Jessica caught his eye and made a small gesture, subtle enough that most wouldn't notice. The supervisor altered his path, moving toward them. Is there a problem? His nameplate read Thomas Reed, branch manager. His smile was tight, his eyes assessing. Jessica leaned in, spoke quietly but not quietly enough. Large withdrawal request. I'm just verifying the account details. Thomas looked at Sarah with the kind of practiced neutrality that barely concealed skepticism. Ma'am, we'll need to confirm a few things. If you could just have a seat in the waiting area, we'll call you when we're ready. I'd prefer to wait here. Sarah's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. Bank policy. Thomas gestured toward the leather chairs near the window. We need to keep the line moving. Around them, other customers, all white, were being served without interruption, without additional questions, without being asked to wait. Sarah registered each discrepancy, filed it away. But she moved toward the waiting area, because making a scene wasn't the goal. Not yet. As she walked away, she heard Jessica whisper something to Thomas. Both of them glanced her way. Thomas picked up a phone, spoke into it while watching Sarah settle into a chair. She opened her tote bag, pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved across the screen, typing a brief message. Michigan Ave Branch, observing. The response came immediately. Documented, standing by. Sarah set the phone on her lap and waited. On the wall across from her, the BV Bank mission statement was etched in brass. Building trust, empowering communities, serving all. The irony wasn't lost on her. 20 minutes passed. Sarah watched the flow of the bank like a director studying her own film. She saw patterns others might miss. The teller who served elderly white customers with patience, but rushed through younger black clients. The loan officer who made eye contact with some people and avoided it with others. The security guard whose attention shifted whenever someone darker-skinned entered. Thomas Reed reappeared, walking toward her with a folder in hand. His pace was deliberately slow, as if he had all the time in the world. He didn't. Ms. Mora? He pronounced her name carefully, like he was testing it. If you'll come with me, I have some questions about your account. Sarah rose, followed him to a desk tucked in the corner, not a private office, but exposed to the entire lobby. She noted that detail too. He wanted this visible. Thomas sat, gestured for her to do the same. He opened the folder, made a show of reviewing documents she couldn't see. So, you're requesting $15,000 in cash? That's correct? Can I ask what the purpose of this withdrawal is? Sarah tilted her head slightly. Is that relevant? For large cash transactions, we have certain obligations. Anti-money laundering protocols, that sort of thing. He smiled, but it didn't soften his face. I'm sure you understand. I understand that other customers weren't asked these questions. Thomas's smile thinned. Every situation is different. Now about the purpose, business expenses, payroll. Sarah's voice was patient, almost gentle. It's my money, in my account, legally earned and properly taxed. Of course, Thomas made a note. And what type of business do you operate? Consulting. Consulting. He repeated the word like it was suspicious by nature. That's pretty vague. What kind of consulting specifically? Financial systems, organizational development. Thomas leaned back in his chair, studying her. Sarah met his gaze without blinking. Around them, the bank hummed with normal activity. Nobody else was being interrogated at a public desk. Ms. Mora, I'm going to be straight with you. Thomas folded his hands on the desk. This account shows some unusual patterns. Large deposits, irregular timing. We need to verify the source of these funds before we can authorize a withdrawal of this size. Unusual by what standard? By our standard. His tone had shifted now, less courteous, more authoritative. Look, I don't make the rules, but when someone comes in dressed... He caught himself, recalibrated. When we see certain red flags, we have a duty to investigate. Sarah let the silence stretch. She watched him squirm slightly, aware he'd almost said something he couldn't take back. How long will this investigation take? She asked finally. Could be a few hours, could be a few days. He closed the folder with a decisive snap. We'll call you when we've completed our review. In the meantime, I'd suggest you bring in additional documentation, bank statements, proof of income, business licenses. I've been banking here for 30 years. Thomas blinked. Excuse me? 30 years. This account has been active since 1995. Not once have I been asked for this level of verification. Sarah's voice remained calm, but something in her eyes had changed. So I'm wondering what's different today. Thomas stood abruptly. Ma'am, if you're not willing to cooperate with our security procedures, I'm afraid I'll have to deny this transaction. He signaled to Jessica, who'd been watching from her station. We take our responsibilities seriously here. Sarah stood as well, gathering her bag slowly. So do I, Mr. Reed. As she turned to leave, she heard Thomas pick up his phone. Yeah, it's me. We've got a situation with a customer, possible fraud risk. No, she's refusing to provide documentation. His voice carried across the lobby, loud enough that nearby customers glanced over. I'm thinking we should flag the account. Yeah, the woman at the corner desk. No, I know the type. Sarah stopped walking, turned back slowly. Thomas saw her looking and had the decency to lower his voice, but not to stop talking. Jessica joined him, whispered something while glancing Sarah's way. Another teller, a young black woman, noticed the interaction and looked away quickly, her face tight with recognition. Sarah pulled out her phone again, opened her email. Her fingers moved with precision. Subject line, immediate intervention required. Body, Michigan Ave, branch manager Thomas Reed, racial profiling in progress. Multiple witnesses, request legal and executive presence within 30 minutes. She hit send. Then she walked back to the waiting area and sat down. On the far side of the lobby, near the ATM machines, she noticed a middle-aged white woman holding up her phone, angled toward Thomas's desk. The woman caught Sarah's eye and mouthed something. "I'm recording this." Sarah gave the smallest nod. The pieces were falling into place. Thomas Reed returned 15 minutes later, but this time he wasn't alone. Jessica walked beside him, and behind them came a third figure, taller, older, with the kind of presence that suggested authority. His suit was expensive, his watch visible even from a distance. The nameplate on his chest read, David Morgan, Regional Director. Sarah recognized the escalation for what it was. They were bringing in reinforcements. David approached with a smile that might have passed for friendly in different circumstances. "Ms. Mora? I'm David Morgan. I oversee operations for this region." He didn't offer his hand. "I understand there's been some confusion about your transaction today." "No confusion on my part." Sarah's voice was steady, clear. "I requested a standard withdrawal from my account. Everything after that has been unusual." David glanced at Thomas, who handed him the folder. He made a show of reviewing it, his eyebrows rising in exaggerated concern. "I see. Well, I'm afraid we have some serious questions about this account." "Such as?" "The pattern of deposits doesn't match typical consulting income. Large, irregular amounts. No clear paper trail." David's tone was conversational, almost apologetic. "Frankly, it raises red flags for us. We have federal obligations. I'm aware of banking regulations, Mr. Morgan. Then you understand why we need to be cautious." He closed the folder, held it against his chest like evidence. "The truth is, Ms. Mora, people in your situation don't usually maintain accounts of this size. It's not personal. It's just pattern recognition." The lobby had grown quieter. Other customers were slowing their movements, sensing drama. Jessica stood behind David with her arms crossed, her expression satisfied. Thomas looked vindicated. Sarah felt the familiar weight of it, the assumption that her presence itself was suspicious, that her money must be illegitimate, that she must have taken it from somewhere or someone she shouldn't have. She'd felt it 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways over 6 decades, but today she'd come prepared. "Pattern recognition," she repeated softly. "Is that what you're calling it?" David's smile tightened. "Ma'am, I'm trying to help you understand our position. If you can't provide adequate documentation, we'll have to freeze this account pending investigation. That's standard protocol for suspected." "Suspected what?" Sarah's voice cut through his, sharp and precise. "Say it clearly, Mr. Morgan. What exactly do you suspect me of?" The lobby went silent. Even the teller machines seemed to pause. David's face hardened. "We suspect that you may not be the legitimate account holder, that this card may have been obtained fraudulently, that you may be attempting to access funds that don't belong to you." He leaned forward slightly. "Let me be clear. If you don't leave this bank immediately and allow us to conduct our investigation, I will call the police, and I'll have you charged with attempted fraud and trespassing." Around them, phones were emerging from pockets. The white woman Sarah had noticed earlier, Linda, though Sarah didn't know her name yet, had her phone raised openly now, recording. A young black man in a business suit had stopped mid-transaction at another window, watching with barely contained anger. Sarah stood slowly. Her movements were deliberate, dignified. "These procedures of yours," she said, her voice carrying across the marble floors, "they seem to apply very selectively. I've watched you serve 12 customers in the time I've been here. Not one of them was questioned like this. Not one of them was treated like a criminal. The only difference I can see, Mr. Morgan, is the color of their skin." David's face flushed. "That's a serious accusation." "It's an observation." Sarah reached into her bag, pulled out her phone. "And I'm not the only one making it." She opened her email, the screen visible to anyone close enough to see. Her inbox was filling with messages, dozens of them, all time-stamped within the last 30 minutes. Subject lines visible. "Discrimination complaint, Michigan Ave. Witness statement attached. Video evidence recorded." David's eyes widened slightly. Thomas looked at Jessica, confused. Sarah looked directly at David, her voice quiet but weighted with absolute certainty. These procedures you're hiding behind, they're not about regulations or security. They're about control, about putting people in their place, about maintaining a system where people who look like me are always suspect, always guilty, always less than. She paused, let the words settle. But here's what you don't understand, Mr. Morgan. You're not implementing the system. You are the system, and systems can be changed. She held his gaze another moment, then spoke again, her voice carrying a question that sounded less like inquiry and more like warning. So I have to ask, do you know who you're dealing with? David's jaw clenched. I know exactly what I'm dealing with, and if you don't leave right now, call them. Sarah's interruption was calm, final. Call the police. Call whoever you want. But know this, everything that happens from this moment forward is being documented. Every word, every action, every decision you make. And the question you'll have to answer later is whether you followed the law or whether you followed your bias. David pulled out his phone, his hand shaking slightly with anger. Fine. You want to make this difficult? Security. He waved to the guard stationed near the entrance. Escort this woman out of the building. If she resists, call the police. The security guard, a black man in his 50s, approached slowly, his face conflicted. He looked at Sarah, then at David, then back at Sarah. Ma'am, he said quietly, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Sarah nodded to him, a small gesture of understanding. He was just doing his job. She gathered her bag, smoothed her cardigan. But before she moved, she looked once more at David Morgan, at Thomas Reed, at Jessica standing triumphant behind them. You should know, she said, her voice carrying across the silent lobby, that discrimination isn't just wrong because it hurts individuals. It's wrong because it corrupts entire institutions. It makes them weak, rotten from the inside, and eventually they collapse. She turned toward the door. I wonder how long before that happens here. As she walked past Linda, the woman with the phone, she heard her whisper, 30,000 views already. This is everywhere. Sarah didn't smile, but she felt the shift beginning. Outside, the Chicago sun was bright and merciless. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting her heartbeat slow. Her phone buzzed. Team mobilized. ETA 15 minutes, legal standing by. She typed back, proceeding as planned. Then she turned and walked back through the revolving doors, back into BV Bank, back into the lobby where David Morgan was still standing at Thomas Reed's desk, looking satisfied with himself. When he saw her return, his face went pale, then red with fury. I told you to leave, and I'm choosing to stay. Sarah's voice was steel wrapped in silk. Because I have every right to be here. This is my bank. These are my accounts. And you, Mr. Morgan, have just made the biggest mistake of your career. David Morgan's face cycled through emotions. Disbelief, anger, then cold calculation. You're trespassing. I gave you a direct order to leave. And I'm a customer conducting legitimate business. Sarah remained near the entrance, her bag on her shoulder, posture relaxed but unmovable. Unless you're denying me service based on discriminatory criteria, I have every right to be here. Thomas Reed moved closer to David, whispered urgently. David shook his head, pulled out his phone. Fine. You want to do this the hard way? He dialed, held the phone to his ear. Yes, this is David Morgan, Regional Director at BV Bank, Michigan Avenue. I need police assistance. We have a customer refusing to leave after being asked multiple times, possible trespassing and disorderly conduct. Around the lobby, the atmosphere shifted. Customers who'd been trying to ignore the situation now openly stared. Some moved toward the exits, uncomfortable. Others pulled out phones, joining Linda in documenting what was unfolding. Sarah didn't move. Her phone buzzed in her hand, a message from Marcus. 6 minutes out. Legal reviewing live footage. Hold position. She typed back one word. Holding. The young black man in the suit, James, stepped forward from his position at the teller window. Excuse me, but I've been here the whole time. I watched everything. This woman hasn't done anything wrong. She just asked to withdraw her own money. David turned on him, voice sharp. Sir, this doesn't concern you. It concerns everyone here. James gestured around the lobby. You're about to have someone arrested for banking while black. You really think that's a good look? I'm enforcing bank policy. David's voice rose, defensive now. And I don't appreciate your implication. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. James pulled out his own phone, began recording. My name is James Richardson. I'm a business owner, and I'm a witness to what I believe is racial discrimination occurring right now at BV Bank. Jessica moved from behind the desk, her voice carrying across the lobby. This woman tried to make a suspicious withdrawal. She couldn't provide proper documentation. She refused to cooperate with security procedures. She looked at the gathering crowd, playing to them. We're just doing our jobs, protecting the bank, protecting all of you. Protecting us from what? Linda, the white woman who'd been recording from the start, stepped forward. Her voice was clear, educated, angry. From a 60-year-old woman trying to access her own account? I've been banking here for 15 years. Not once have I been asked for the documentation you demanded from her. Not once. The lobby was no longer functioning as a bank. Tellers had stopped serving customers. Everyone had become an audience, witnesses to something that felt bigger than a single transaction. David's face was crimson now. Ma'am, you don't understand the full situation. I understand perfectly. Linda's phone was still raised, still recording. I understand I'm watching 3 bank employees target a black woman for treatment they would never apply to me. And I'm watching it happen in real time, and so are 40,000 people on Facebook right now. David's eyes widened. 40? 43,000 now, Linda corrected, glancing at her screen. It's going viral. Had BV bank discrimination is trending locally. Thomas grabbed David's arm, pulled him aside. Their whispered conversation was fierce, urgent. Jessica stood alone now, her confident expression faltering as she noticed how many phones were pointed in her direction. Sarah watched it all with the calm of someone who'd anticipated every move. Her phone buzzed again, this time a different message from Elizabeth Hart. On site in 4 minutes. Legal team deployed. Board has been notified. What do you need? Sarah typed quickly. Let it play out. They need to show who they are. A siren wailed in the distance, growing closer. The police responding to David's call. Sarah felt a flutter of something, not fear, but awareness. This was the moment that could go very wrong, where the color of her skin could turn a business dispute into something dangerous. But she'd planned for this too. James moved to stand beside her, not touching, just present. I'm not leaving, he said quietly. Whatever happens, you have witnesses. Linda joined them on the other side. Recorded witnesses. Other customers, a mix of races, ages, backgrounds, began to gather in a loose semicircle around Sarah. Not everyone. Some hurried out the doors, wanting no part of whatever was coming, but enough stayed, enough cared. The police cars pulled up outside, lights flashing through the glass doors. 2 officers entered, one white, one Hispanic, both with expressions that suggested they'd responded to calls like this before and didn't enjoy them. They looked at David, at Sarah, at the crowd of people with phones raised. Who called? The white officer asked, voice professionally neutral. David stepped forward. I did. I'm the regional director. This woman is trespassing. I asked her to leave multiple times, and she's refused. The officer looked at Sarah. Ma'am, is this your understanding of the situation? No, officer. Sarah's voice was calm, respectful. I'm a customer who came in to conduct a legal transaction. I was subjected to discriminatory treatment, asked for documentation that other customers weren't required to provide, and then threatened with arrest when I questioned the disparity. The officer's eyes shifted between them, calculating. His partner was already scanning the crowd, noticing the phones, the recording, the witnesses. He leaned in, whispered something. The first officer nodded. Sir, he addressed David, can you show me documentation that this woman was actually trespassing? Did she commit any crime, damage any property, threaten anyone? She refused to leave when instructed. That's not a crime if she's a customer conducting legitimate business. The officer's tone was careful, professional. Do you have evidence of fraud, of illegal activity? David hesitated. We have suspicions based on account patterns. Suspicions aren't evidence. The officer turned to Sarah. Ma'am, do you have account information? Identification? Sarah handed over her driver's license and debit card. The officer examined them, then looked at David. These appear legitimate. Unless you have concrete evidence of fraud, I'm not sure what you expect us to do here. Thomas jumped in, voice desperate now. We have the right to refuse service. You have the right to refuse service for legitimate business reasons, the Hispanic officer interjected. What you don't have the right to do is discriminate based on race. And from what I'm seeing, he gestured at the phones, the crowd, the obvious disparity in treatment. This looks like it could be a civil rights issue, not a criminal one. David's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his face went white. I need to take this. Make it quick, the first officer said. David walked a few steps away, phone to his ear. From where Sarah stood, she could hear his side of the conversation. Yes, I understand, but no, I tried to. She wouldn't. His voice dropped lower, but his body language spoke volumes. Shoulders hunching, free hand rubbing his face, the posture of a man receiving very bad news. He hung up, walked back. His expression had changed, the anger replaced by something closer to fear. There's been a misunderstanding, he said, voice tight. Corporate is sending someone to handle this situation. Corporate? Thomas looked confused. Why would corporate? I don't know, David snapped. But they said to halt everything and wait. Sarah's phone buzzed. Marcus. Arriving now. Elizabeth right behind me. The front doors opened and a man in a sharp charcoal suit entered, moving with purpose. Marcus Chen, assistant CEO, Sarah's right hand for 15 years. He scanned the lobby, found Sarah, and his expression hardened when he saw the police, the crowd, the phones. Behind him, Elizabeth Hart emerged from a black town car, her silver hair perfectly styled, her bearing radiating authority. Board chair, former Federal Reserve officer, and the second largest shareholder in BV Bank after Sarah herself. David saw them, and something in his face collapsed. Ms. Hart, I didn't know you were. Obviously. Elizabeth's voice could have frozen water. She walked past David without another glance, straight to Sarah. Ms. Mora, I apologize for the delay. The lobby went absolutely still. Thomas's face drained of color. Jessica took a step backward, her hand rising to her mouth. David stood frozen, his brain clearly trying to process what he'd just heard. Marcus moved to Sarah's other side, producing a slim leather folder. Officers, I'm Marcus Chen, assistant CEO of BV Bank. I believe there's been a significant error here. This woman, he gestured to Sarah, is Sarah Mora. She founded this bank in 1995. She currently owns 60% of all shares and serves as chief executive officer and board chair. The words landed like grenades. The white officer blinked. She's the CEO? And majority shareholder. Elizabeth's voice was ice. The woman your caller tried to have arrested is, quite literally, his ultimate supervisor. David made a sound, not quite a word, not quite a gasp. Thomas grabbed the desk behind him for support. Jessica had gone pale as paper. James, the young businessman who'd defended Sarah, let out a laugh that was pure disbelief. Oh my God. Linda's voice came through clearly, narrating for her live stream. Folks, you're not going to believe this. The woman they tried to arrest? She owns the bank. 55,000 people are watching this right now. The police officers looked at each other. The white one turned to David. Sir, I think we're done here. You might want to sort this out internally. They left, professional to the end. But Sarah saw the Hispanic officer shake his head in disgust as he pushed through the revolving door. Sarah stood in the center of it all. The crowd, the phones, the cameras, the crumbling facade of three people who'd just realized they'd destroyed their own careers. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Only a deep, weary certainty that this moment had been inevitable from the first suspicious glance, the first discriminatory question, the first assumption that her presence was threat rather than authority. Marcus moved closer, lowered his voice. How do you want to handle this? Sarah looked at David, at Thomas, at Jessica. Looked at the young black teller who'd witnessed it all from behind her window, her eyes wide with something like hope. Looked at James and Linda, strangers who'd stood beside her because it was right. Exactly as planned, she said quietly. Every step, every consequence. The silence stretched like pulled wire. David Morgan's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound. Beside him, Thomas had gone the color of old snow. Jessica stood frozen, her confidence evaporated into terror. Sarah let the moment breathe. Elizabeth Hart stepped forward, heels clicking on marble. "Ms. Mora, would you like to sit down?" "I'm fine, Elizabeth." Sarah's voice was steady. She looked at the crowd, customers, employees, the young black teller watching from her window. "But we need a conversation, a public one." Marcus opened his folder, pulled out a tablet. "Ms. Mora has been conducting unannounced assessments across our branches for 6 weeks. Michigan Avenue is the 14th location." He looked up. "It's also the worst." David found his voice strangled. "Ms. Mora, I had no idea. If I'd known, that's the problem." Sarah's interruption was gentle but sharp. "You treated me this way because you didn't know who I was, which means you treat everyone who looks like me the same way." She stepped closer. "The question isn't what you would have done if you'd known. It's why you did what you did when you didn't." Thomas tried next, shaking. "We were following protocol." "Show me." Sarah held out her hand. "Show me the written protocol." Silence. David looked at the floor. "You can't," Sarah said, "because it doesn't exist. What exists is bias, the kind that sees a black woman and assumes criminal before customer." Jessica's voice came thin, desperate. "I was just doing my job. Your job is to serve customers with dignity." Sarah's eyes found hers. "Not to make assumptions based on skin color. That's not banking. That's bigotry." Linda's live stream was still running. 70,000 viewers now. She angled her phone to capture Sarah's calm, infinitely sad expression. Marcus cleared his throat. "Customer complaints filed against this branch in 6 months. 47. 39 from customers of color. Common themes: excessive documentation, questioning legitimacy, hostile treatment." Elizabeth's expression hardened. "And what action was taken, Mr. Morgan?" David's silence was answer enough. "None," Sarah said quietly, "because complaints went to you and you dismissed them, buried them. But they weren't isolated, they were systemic, and you enabled it." James spoke up from the crowd. "I filed one of those complaints 3 months ago, accused of using a fake check." His voice was tight. "My check was legitimate, my business was legitimate, but I was treated like a criminal." Other voices joined. "Made me wait 2 hours. Asked where I got the money, like I'd stolen it. Wouldn't approve my loan, 780 credit score." Stories bubbled up, a chorus of discrimination that had been happening beneath the brass mission statement for years. Sarah listened, her heart breaking and hardening. This was why she'd come. Not for herself, but for them. David tried once more, voice cracking. "Please, I made a mistake. I can fix this. New training, new policies." "You can't fix this, because you are this." Sarah's voice was final. "You built this culture, protected it, benefited from it." She turned to Elizabeth. "I want him removed, today. Reed and Patterson, too." Elizabeth nodded. "Done." "Wait." David's composure shattered. 20 years with this bank. 20 years of how many people treated like this? Sarah's question hung. How many careers damaged? Dreams dismissed? No answer. Sarah addressed the lobby, voice rising. "I didn't come for revenge. I came for truth. Institutions that should serve everyone have been failing those who need them most. Not because of policy, but people. People who let bias guide decisions." She looked at the young black teller. "What's your name?" "Alicia, ma'am." "How long here?" 3 years. "Have you seen this happen to others?" Alicia's eyes filled with tears. She nodded. "Did you report it?" "I tried. Once. Was told I was too sensitive. To trust management's judgment." Her voice broke. "I stopped trying." Sarah walked to her window, placed her palm against the glass. "You weren't wrong, Alicia. You weren't too sensitive. You were right. And they silenced you. That ends today." Marcus stepped forward, everything documented. Security footage, recorded transactions, testimonials, complaint records, legal prepared for termination, and civil rights investigations. "Good." Sarah turned to David, Thomas, Jessica. You're all terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Formal notification within 48 hours. And I will personally ensure every banking institution knows why you were fired. Jessica burst into tears. Thomas looked sick. David stood frozen. Elizabeth signaled security. The same black guard who'd been asked to remove Sarah approached David. Sir, come with me. They were led out past cameras, past customers, past the mission statement they'd violated. The doors closed with a soft whoosh. The lobby exhaled. Linda lowered her phone. 98,000 views, CNN's calling, MSNBC, everyone. Sarah felt exhaustion hit, not physical, but emotional. But underneath, resolve. Call all staff meeting, she told Marcus and Elizabeth. Every employee. I want to talk to them, especially those afraid to speak up. James approached. Miss Mora, what you did. I stood up for myself. Something everyone should be able to do without being CEO. She smiled. But thank you for standing with me. If people like us don't stand together, James said firmly, nothing changes. Linda joined them. Why let it go so far? You could have revealed yourself any time. Sarah considered. Because if I had, they'd have apologized only because I had power. They needed to show who they really are when no one's watching. That's when you learn what people truly believe. That's what needs to change. Not just behavior, but belief. Sarah Mora stood in her own bank, surrounded by witnesses to something extraordinary. Not authority revealed, but humanity claimed and justice demanded. The revolution doesn't always look like rage. Sometimes it looks like a woman in a cardigan, refusing to move until justice moves with her. The aftermath moved with the speed of consequence. Within 48 hours, David Morgan, Thomas Reed, and Jessica Patterson were terminated. The press releases didn't soften language. Violations of equal treatment policy, discriminatory conduct, failure to uphold ethical standards. Sarah insisted on clarity. David's 20-year career ended with a security escort and a cardboard box. His reputation collapsed in the time one viral video took to spread. Other banks quietly removed his name from consideration. In financial services, word traveled fast. Nobody wanted the liability. Thomas faced similar exile. The manager who'd called Sarah the type found himself unemployable. His LinkedIn went silent. Former colleagues stopped returning calls. Jessica discovered 26 wasn't protection against consequences. Her banking career ended before it began. The video of her standing behind David, satisfaction on her face, that image became permanent. Every Google search would surface it forever. But termination was only beginning. Sarah filed civil charges against all three for Civil Rights Act violations and discrimination. The lawsuit wasn't about money. Settlements would fund financial literacy programs. It was about accountability, legal precedent, making clear that discriminatory behavior carried weight. Cook County Court moved with unusual efficiency. Judge Maria Santos showed no patience for following procedure or honest mistakes defenses. She'd seen the videos, read complaint histories, heard testimony from 47 customers. Her ruling was unambiguous. David Morgan paid $500,000 damages and received 18 months suspended sentence, prison time hanging over him, activated if he violated probation, including mandatory anti-bias training and 200 hours community service. Thomas and Jessica received similar probation, 5-year bans from financial services employment and community service requirements. Discrimination is not minor offense, Judge Santos stated. It is assault on human dignity. When people in power abuse that power to demean others based on race, consequences must match severity. The courtroom was packed. The ruling made national news. But effects extended beyond 3 employees. The Federal Reserve investigated BV Bank's fair lending compliance. The FDIC reviewed complaint procedures across all branches. Shareholders demanded answers. Stock dropped 7%. Sarah didn't shield the institution. At the emergency board meeting, we failed. Not just Michigan Avenue, but the entire organization. We built systems that let bias hide behind procedure, created culture where complaints were dismissed, prioritized reputation over righteousness. That changes now completely. Reforms came comprehensive, intensive unconscious bias training for all employees. Branch managers replaced network-wide, preference for underrepresented candidates. Community Oversight Board established with authority to review complaints. Banking Equality Initiative launched nationally to monitor institutions for discrimination and provide legal support. Congress noticed. Senator Patricia Williams invited Sarah to testify. The hearing room was standing room only. "What happened to me happens to millions daily," Sarah told the committee, cameras broadcasting nationwide. "In banks, stores, hospitals, schools. The difference is, I had power to fight back. Most don't. We need federal legislation making institutions accountable for patterns, not just incidents. Transparency in complaint data. Consequences that hurt enough to change behavior." 6 months later, the Banking Equality Act passed with bipartisan support. First major civil rights legislation in financial services in decades. It required quarterly public reporting of discrimination complaints, established federal oversight, created pathways for restitution without costly litigation. David watched the bill signing from his apartment, alone, his marriage another casualty. Thomas saw it from his parents' basement. Jessica caught a glimpse on TV at the grocery store where she now worked as cashier. Minimum wage, no benefits, humbling descent. They'd learned too late. People you dismiss aren't powerless. They're waiting for their moment. When it comes, the fall is swift and absolute. Sarah didn't celebrate their suffering, took no joy in their ruin, but didn't regret it either, because beyond individual fates was something larger, a system shaken, standard raised, message sent that discrimination would no longer be tolerated, ignored, explained away. The bank that tried to throw her out now bore her imprint in every policy. The industry that enabled bias now operated under new scrutiny. The country that gave lip service to equality now had laws with teeth. It wasn't perfect, but it was change. Real, measurable, consequential. And it started with one woman, one bank, one refusal to accept less than human. 3 months later, Sarah sat for an interview in a Southside community center, surrounded by young people attending a financial literacy workshop funded by the Banking Equality Initiative. The interviewer asked, "Looking back, would you do anything differently?" Sarah considered carefully. "I wouldn't change what I did, but I wish I hadn't needed to." She gestured to the students around them. Every person who walks into a bank should be met with respect, not because they might be powerful, but because they're human. That shouldn't be radical, but somehow it still is. What do you want people to understand? That it wasn't about me. I was standing in for millions who face these indignities daily without resources to fight back. The woman treated like a criminal cashing her paycheck. The man denied a loan for reasons unrelated to credit. The teenager learning their skin color determines perception. She paused. Dignity isn't privilege, it's a right. Defending it isn't optional, it's our responsibility. Students nodded. They had their own stories. Stopped by security, followed in stores, questioned about whether they could afford purchases. "People ask if I'm angry," Sarah continued. "I was. I am. But anger alone doesn't change systems. What changes them is channeling that anger into action, into accountability, into building something better." About the 3 fired employees. I feel responsible for holding them accountable. They made choices. Those choices had consequences. But I don't take pleasure in their suffering. I hope they learn, grow, become people who'd never treat others that way. She looked at the camera. This is about transformation, not just punishment. We need systems that prevent discrimination, not just punish it after. Systems built on genuine equality, not performance of it. A student asked, "What advice for people facing discrimination without your power?" Document everything. Names, dates, witnesses, because they'll try to make you question yourself. Trust your experience. Sarah paused. And find community. The people who stood with me, James, Linda, Alicia, they chose solidarity. We're stronger together. As Sarah left the center, the sun set over Chicago. Somewhere in those millions of lives were people who'd seen her story and felt seen. People who'd decided to speak up. People choosing solidarity over complicity. She couldn't change the past, but she could shape the future. One policy, one conversation, one person at a time learning their dignity was non-negotiable. That was enough. Sarah's story rippled outward. In boardrooms, executives wondered if their institutions would survive scrutiny. In classrooms, students discussed standing up. In living rooms, families talked about dignity and silence's cost. The story became a mirror for a country struggling between ideals and reality. 1 year after Michigan Avenue, Sarah released a message. If you see injustice, you have a choice. Look away or do something. Her voice was steady. Document what you see. Speak up. Support those targeted. Demand accountability. Vote for leaders who understand equality isn't talking point. It's moral imperative. Don't wait for permission. She smiled, mischievous. And remember, never judge by appearance. That woman in worn cardigan, that man in modest car, they might be more than you think. The person you dismiss today might sign your paycheck tomorrow, or close your bank, or change laws governing your industry. The camera pulled back, showing renovated Michigan Avenue branch. New mission statement. We see you, we respect you, we serve you, because you are human beings deserving dignity. The system tried to break me. It didn't. It won't break you either if you refuse. Stand firm. Demand respect. When you have power, use it to lift others, not keep them down. Direct to camera. Change doesn't happen because institutions develop conscience. It happens because people decide enough is enough. What will you do? What will you stand for? The video ended with Sarah walking into sunshine. Her story sparked action nationwide. Discrimination complaints increased 300%, not because bias increased, but because people believed complaints might matter. Community oversight boards established everywhere. Banking Equality Act inspired legislation in healthcare, housing, education. Sarah wasn't special. She just refused to be invisible, silent, accepting that things couldn't change. That refusal was something anyone could choose, would you?